So the 6 pillars that I talk about, 1 is diet, 2 is supplements, 3 is stress management, 4 is exercise, 5 is detoxification, and 6 is bioidentical hormone management. Now we're going to speak mostly about the 5th pillar today. You know, up until a few years ago, I really only talked about the first 4 pillars, probably up until about 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, I even started to write a book about the 4 pillars of vibrant health. And then I began to realize that toxins were such an important aspect of our lives that we couldn't approach true health care and true health without addressing this problem. You know, my focus has always been on the logical way to approach health by looking at the way our ancestors lived. You know, our ancestors ate a hunter-gatherer diet. They exercised in bursts. They didn't take supplements, but their soil was not, you know, was not contaminated and depleted like ours was. And, you know, so they lived kind of a clean life. And I never really appreciated how important toxins in our environment were to creating ill health. And so I added this 5th pillar. Later on, I also added a 6th pillar when I started to understand how important hormone balancing was as we get older. But I'm going to speak mostly about this 5th pillar because I truly believe that without dealing with the toxins in our lives, we can no longer look at this as just something, just be natural and do the best you can. And without dealing with these toxins and even eliminating these toxins, not just trying to avoid it, because it's almost impossible to avoid the toxins that we live in. We're really bathed in a soup of toxins, as I'll describe. But it's important to actually actively detoxify on a regular basis. So this conference in San Diego was focused on detoxification. And it was pretty clear that the toxins fell into a few categories. One of the most important categories was heavy metals. Now, how many people think they've been exposed to heavy metals? It's pretty good. I'd say about half of the people think they've been exposed to heavy metals. Well, I got news for the other half, you have been. You've all been exposed to heavy metals. Some of us are able to detoxify these heavy metals more effectively than others. But most of us still have too many in our body. And what I mean by too much heavy metals in our body is that it's been described in the literature more and more. You know, there was one time that the level of lead that was permitted in kids, that was considered to be okay, was about 60 micrograms per deciliter. So just think of that number, 60. Then they found out that kids who had 50 had severe emotional and mental problems. They had poor learning, they had learning disabilities, so they lowered it down to 40. This was about 20 years ago or more. They then found out that people in kids who had their lead levels in their 30s were also having problems. Severe learning disabilities, trouble getting ahead in school, so they lowered it down to 25. And then later on, the same thing happened, they lowered it down to 10. Now, what's very clear is that between 0 and 10, every increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, every increase in the lead level in a child reduces their IQ. What's become clear also is that there's no safe level of lead in our bodies. No safe level. Doesn't mean like a little bit is okay. Nobody has actually even ever come up with a safe level. What's very clear also is that even at the lowest lead levels, there's an increase in all-cause mortality in adults. So you guys who are sitting there with very small, low levels of lead are actually reducing your lifespan. Some of it by cardiovascular disease, to a certain degree possibly by cancer, but there's going to be a reduction in your lifespan just with the presence of lead in your lives. Where do we get lead from? Well, most of us who are my age lived through a long period of time where there was a huge amount of lead being spewed into the atmosphere because all our gasoline was leaded. And it was burned, and it went up into the clouds, and the rain came down, and it came down into the soil. And guess what was growing in the soil? Our crops. And who was eating the crops? The animals that ate the crops that we ate. So we got it from our produce and we got it from animals. And, you know, if you do a lead level in a person's body, when they've been exposed to lead, the blood level goes up for a month or a little bit longer. After a month, it goes down. Does that mean that the lead is gone? It's not. Where does it end up? All throughout the body, in the central nervous system, and with lead, particularly in the bones. That lead in the bones is a very important repository, and it creates ill health throughout life. But when your bones start to get a little softer, for example, as women get older, they go into menopause, they start losing bone health, that lead is released into the body, creating all kinds of medical problems, including high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, brain fog. A lot of the symptoms of so-called menopause are related to, actually are very similar to the symptoms of lead overload. So all of us have lead, too much. What about other metals? Well, it turns out that lead is not the only one that's around. How many people think that they have an overload of mercury in their lives? Yeah, it's not just Jeremy Piven. The rest of you haven't raised your hands. You've all been overexposed to mercury. You know, there's no safe fish anymore. You know, when I went into this conference, you know, I was the program director, but there were experts in each of the individual fields. So somebody really was an expert in mercury. Turns out they've been doing research on fish and actually on patients who've been eating fish. There's no safe fish. I've been eating wild salmon every day because it was the last safe fish that I thought existed. It turns out that even wild salmon has a certain amount of mercury, and people who eat salmon regularly, like I do, probably have an elevated blood mercury. So I've come back with the intention of doing that test. I'm going to go back to my office tomorrow and speak to the people who work for me and to give me that kit. Ask Maria to give me that kit, and hopefully that will, I'll find out what my urine mercury is. The best way to really test for body burden is to do a urine-provoked screen, and that will tell us actually what's in the body. Remember I said that blood levels only shows recent exposure. The recent exposure is not the burden in your body. Even what passes out of your bloodstream into your body stays there, it's stored. There's been some studies on, for example, on patients who have heart failure. They found that they have 22,000 times the amount of mercury in heart cells than in normal heart cells. So when a person goes into heart failure, there's 22,000 times the amount of mercury. Now that probably is related to mercury actually contributing to the heart failure, but also when a cell starts to get damaged, it can't resist taking up the mercury as well. So it's a vicious cycle. As our bodies become more and more damaged, we take up more and more and more of these heavy metals, and we can't get rid of them as well. Now, as I said, some people are more able to get rid of them than others, so some people run into problems. Other people run into less problems, more vague problems they don't even know usually related to these metals. It turns out also that even if you have exposure and a body burden of 2 metals that are really below threshold that you can't even test for, they're synergistic, which means that they're much more powerful in combination, even to such a degree that it may be 100 times more powerful than the individual problem alone. So if you're exposed to a small amount of mercury and a small amount of lead, the two together may be 100 times as dangerous as being exposed to that, any one separately.